Welcome, everyone. My name is Bethany Peebles. I'm the Executive Director of the Consultation Department at Art Optical, and I want to thank you for joining us this evening for the final event of this educational series. So tonight we are going to be talking about utilizing technology to boost your success, and we have Randy Kojima here with us this evening to talk about that. Thank you, Randy. And just want to introduce him. He is the Clinical Research and Development Director for Precision Technology based in Vancouver, Canada. Randy also serves as research scientist and clinical instructor at the Pacific University College of Optometry in Forest Grove, Oregon. Additionally, he is a clinical advisor to Medma Instruments in Melbourne, Australia. And lastly, Randy is a fellow of the American Academy of Optometry, the British Contact Lens Association, the Scleral Lens Education Society, and the International Academy of Orthokeratology. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to you, Randy.
Awesome. Thanks, Bethany. And thanks for this opportunity to talk to everybody about MOONLENS and this KATTCloud that we're going to discuss tonight. As Bethany said, this is the third webinar on the system. And this one's very dedicated to how you would more manually input information if you needed to. So if you have a linked topographer, then the second session is probably most appropriate to you. If your topographer is not linked, then this is the right video to be taking part in. So let's get started. The KATTCloud Platform is a web-based software that you would design your moon lenses from. It was created so that you can upload the topography and it will design the moon lens for you, but it'll also problem solve when you need to fine tune the results. So this platform is essentially what we're going to discuss today. The idea is to make orthokeratology as easy and simple and efficient as you possibly can. If you have a linked topographer, then you basically just click on that Cloud Link button and it will take your topographies and upload it to the site. When you need to problem solve the post-wear response, it will allow you also to upload the topography and review. So this whole platform was designed to just make the whole process simple, accurate, efficient. But if your topographer does not link to the platform, does that mean that you are not going to be able to build as customized a lens? And this is what we wanted to dedicate this session to, was to help those that do not have a linked topographer to the site, how you can very successfully create a highly customized lens, and also how you can also be efficient with orthokeratology. Now, why wouldn't your topographer be capable of linking to the site? It may be that there's many topographers that embed their software in the instrument itself. So computer and instrument are all one, and they typically protect anything coming in or out of the system to make sure that the platform is going to be protected. So often there are limits on how it can communicate with third-party software. So that could be a reason. It could be that the topographer that you have isn't maybe as commonly found in the industry, and therefore it just hasn't had its turn to be uploaded to the KATTCloud platform. So talk to Bethany and the Art Optical team, and they'll be able to tell you whether it's on the roadmap. Is it just around the corner and you're able to upload very soon? But in the meantime, if you can't directly link your topographer to the site, how would you order a moon lens through the KATTCloud platform? That's where we wanted to focus our attention today. Now, everything starts with topography. No matter what your system is, no matter what your topographer is, you need one really good topography. You need one accurate topography. That's ultimately what we're looking for. If you have an accurate map, then you're going to have a ideal initial lens parameter calculated for that eye. So quite simple. Here we have one topography of this eye. Does this look to you like it is a accurate interpretation of a very healthy normal eye? Um, wouldn't it appear that we have a form of keratoconus or a ultra steep coned central corneal cap? This is not the real shape of this patient's eye. This was just a bad topography. I did a poor job moving the instrument too quick, or the patient wasn't steady enough when I took that capture. There was maybe tear film breakup in the center that was limiting the accuracy. This is the real shape of this patient's eye, a normal with the rule apical astigmatism. So never trust just one map. Always assume your topographer is lying to you. And the way you can confirm is to take multiple maps. If you see reproducibility in your topographies, then you have great confidence that you have an accurate interpretation of the eye. And this is a good example where every one of our maps looks different. This is the same eye imaged 4 times over, and there is zero reproducibility here. So that's a dead giveaway that there's a problem with the mapping. Was the patient moving around too much when you took the captures? Were you, as the user, unsteady with the instrument? Was the tear film really bad? Was the fissure size causing a hindrance to capture? Those are some of the things that you might look at. What we want to see is something that looks like this, where we have one eye imaged and we can see 4 duplicate images in each capture. And that gives us much more confidence that we have the correct interpretation of this patient's eye shape and therefore an accurate understanding of the eye so we can build an accurate moon lens. Now, some topographers allow you to merge multiple maps together and take a mean. That is probably the best way to go. If your instrument will allow you to select a multitude, minimum of 4 is what we're looking for, but let's say 6 or 8 or even better, you can then take the mean of those numbers and you're most likely to have the most accurate starting point for your moon lens calculation. Now let's just go back to this poor capture process that I must have had with this patient. And if I asked you to pick just one of these maps, which one would you choose to build the lens? Let's assume the patient came in, we did the topography, our technician did the topography, patient wandered away, left for their 1-hour drive back home. We need to design lenses and get them ordered so we can bring them back. Not easy to bring the patient back for mapping, so we kind of forced to pick one of these. And which one would you pick? And I might encourage you to select the upper left image. It's the closest to an hourglass figure 8 astigmatism that we typically see in a normal astigmatic eye. Certainly the bottom left image shows the fissure size has been squeezed down. All those eyelashes are probably creating shadows that are hindering the accuracy. You've got a big red area inferior of center. This spot right here, that's probably due to the tear wedge. You can see some of the rings have started to look more horizontal rather than concentric all the way around. This map, we've got a high spot here, we've got another high spot here, we've got another high spot here. That's sort of unusual. This topography might be relatively accurate, but the fissure size is hindering some of the data from the superior cornea. So if we had to pick one, I'd say the upper left, but I don't love the lack of reproducibility here. So ideally, take multiple maps and choose the best one. And Bethany, could I ask you to come on with us a bit and tell us your perspective on the importance of this baseline capture. Am I exaggerating, the how important this capture is? And, could you share with us some of your thoughts?
So not at all, Randy. This is so important that quality baseline topography really is key. That's not only what we're building the first lens from, but we are referencing that baseline topography at every follow-up visit when we are doing those comparison maps. So if our baseline is questionable at all, then unfortunately throughout the fitting process, as we do those comparison maps, those distorted mires or the tear prism is too much, throwing things off, the lashes, all of that, unfortunately, are part of the fitting process the whole way through. So it is really important to spend that time. And the thing is, and I understand it is hard sometimes, like you said, that you send the patient off. They always live an hour away, it seems like, right? And so it's hard. They can't just pop back in. But the thing would be that if we get into the fitting, we say, let's go ahead and do it. Let's just pick this one and we're going to go with it. And we get a few, maybe a couple weeks in, or we're a couple lenses in, and you're like, oh, I really think it's from that baseline. Well, now we have to discontinue lens wear and have them wash out. And that's really not a fun option either. So I think it's super important.
Yeah, I think you absolutely nailed it, Bethany. I often say the most important topography you take in orthokeratology is the baseline. The post-treatment really doesn't matter because there's always going to be another post-treatment visit. If we get it wrong on one of the visits, not a big deal, but you are absolutely right. If we're going to use that baseline to do all of our subtractive analysis, you got to have a good map. And yeah,
For
it's
sure.
just such a good point, Bethany. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So here are some of the data points that we need. The HVID, the horizontal visible iris diameter, or the size of the cornea ultimately. We're looking for the apical radius flat and steep meridian and the eccentricity flat and steep meridian across an 8 millimeter chord. Now, if you're used to collecting K readings, this data might seem a little bit foreign, but man, it's in virtually every topographer I've ever seen. So it should be relatively easy to collect this if you know what to look for. So let's make sure that you know what to look for. And one of those easy ones is capturing the visible iris diameter. Some instruments do this automatically for you. Some of them you need to manually run a ruler across the eye. In this case, we can see the VID is 11.9, and your moon lens is going to ideally be calculated VID minus 0.8. So in this case, if we subtract 0.8 from 11.9, we should be in 11.1 diameter moon lens. The idea is that Art Optical wants the moon lens to be the appropriate size for every eye. We're not going to design a tiny lens for a big eye or a monster lens for a small eye. Let's make sure we get the appropriate size and depth on every patient. So that one's really important. Just having the right size, such a simple thing that we do in custom lenses, but I mean, how often do we think about VID and contact lenses in general? In orthokeratology, really critical to our success. Now, the flat RO means the flat radius at zero distance from center. So we're not talking about the K readings. We're talking about the radius of the eye right in the center of the topography. So we're looking for this spot right here and this spot across the flat axis of the eye. So it's kind of like thinking of this flat K reading, except not taken at 3 millimeters, taken right in the middle, but across the flat axis. Then similarly, we're going to do that for the steep meridian. We want to know the radius of the cornea right at the peak, right at the apex, so that we can calculate the depth all the way out. So it begins with understanding the center of the cornea. Then you're going to capture the eccentricity. And if you're not familiar with this term, eccentricity is describing in topography the rate of corneal flattening, or the rate of change from the corneal apex to the periphery of the eye. The more your cornea changes in curvature, the higher the eccentricity value. That is also used in combination with the central radius, the RO value, the radius at zero distance, to determine the depth of lens you need, the shape of lens you need for the alignment zone, also the base curve for calculating the right therapy target, the right mold shape. So all of these things go into the construction of the lens on both the flat and the steep meridian. So we want the eccentricity across an 8 mm diameter. If you can capture that, if your instrument does not give you a opportunity to select a core diameter of measure, that's okay. Eccentricity generally is a constant, and therefore if your E value is over 7 or 9, it's probably not going to be hugely different. Ideally, capture it at 8 mm, and that way you know your moon lens is going to be as accurate as possible. Now, by capturing the eccentricity value, we're likely to improve our accuracy a step, because if you're building a lens purely on K readings, you're understanding 3 mm diameter of the center, but you're not understanding the periphery where the lens lands. By adding E value in there, you're getting to understand the eye as a whole. So it's one of the ways that the moon lens is very accurately calculated for each eye. Now, this is the data collection we're looking for: the visible iris diameter, size of the cornea, the apical radius, or RO flat, the RO steep, the E value flat, and the E value steep. Now, if you're used to looking at your topographer, or you're brand new to your topographer, and these data points aren't necessarily as obvious to you, Bethany, how difficult is it to find this stuff? And is this something the art team can help with? Could you explain to us how we get access to this information?
Yeah, so in most cases, in most topography units, we're very familiar with a good number of them. We work with a variety of topographies every day. And so we've become pretty familiar with the navigating these different units. So generally, we will be able to help you kind of walk through where to grab these different items that we need. And the other thing would be is that there's some we know actually don't go either, like you said, to 8 mm, but one that just stops at 7 mm. Again, that's fine. That's close enough. Another topography unit actually just provides a mean eccentricity. So it's doing both flat and steep. So it's not separating them. So in that case, we kind of use default values. And so the consultants can definitely help each individual practitioner as far as understanding their particular unit. And if we don't know that device, obviously, then we can generally direct them where they might be able to find that answer. So
Yeah, awesome. And whenever I've seen maps get sent to you guys, I'm always moved that it doesn't matter what the topographer. It seems like you guys have the software for virtually every topographer there. So it makes it awfully helpful when you've got practitioners from all over the country. Bethany, I want to ask you another question related to the data. Every once in a while, I have a bad go with the patient. In other words, I just can't get them to open up wide enough to get a decent capture. I might not get good information. What if I don't have enough data to capture an E value, let's say? Or what if my topographer doesn't collect apical radius for some reason? Can you build a lens from K readings?
yes, so you can definitely and successfully design it simply from K readings or from using an average eccentricity value. And so again, because there are some of the units that don't necessarily have an RO, or again, they might use a mean eccentricity, which we don't want to use. or if we do question, particularly the vertical eccentricity is the one that often we will get a value that just looks a little unusual and doesn't really make sense with decay readings, then that's probably the one that we honestly throw out and say, we're not going to use the steep E value. That data doesn't look accurate. And it's always better to kind of go back to our default values or the average values that we can use versus using data that's questionable.
It's very common for us to struggle a lot with particular patients, not everybody, but every once in a while it pops up. My son was one of them, and it took 3 goes to try to capture on him. He just didn't want that instrument coming toward him. And you guys might find that it's helpful for those patients that are really nervous, really fidgety, just getting them accustomed to the instrument, maybe in multiple sessions, might be helpful for some of these captures that are really tough. My mentor had recommended that, like, let's not push it. Let's just do this another day and come back, and we're able to get an image the next time or the time after. And just that whole newness of having this instrument with all the lights, and it's invading your space. And so, considering we're often topography or mostly topographing on kids in orthokeratology, it might be something that it's helpful to get better data. Now, once we have the information that we need to calculate the MOONLENS, we're going to go to the KATTCloud platform. We're going to go online. This is not a software you download. This is one that you would acquire from the Art Optical team. They would provide you with your login and your password and such. And that way you can log in from virtually any computer and get access to the fitting software. Once you're in, now you have your dashboard, and this is the main window that you might peruse very quickly. And it tells you how many patients you've put through, how many are waiting on an outcome, how many are in the lab, how many are waiting for the consultant to review. It gives you a understanding of what's happening with your practice, with your patients alone. Now, let's presume we wanted to create a new patient. Let's just go up to the top right and click Create Patient. So we're going to create a brand new patient to calculate MOONLENSes from. Then we're going to enter in the data, and it's the usual stuff: the patient name, the date of birth, the RX, the size of the eye, all of this information going to be used to calculate your lenses and for Art Optical to be able to appropriately invoice for that identification. Now, you might notice that we have an RX of 350 minus 1.25, axis 175, visible iris diameter of 11.9 on the right, and on the left, a 350 minus 150, axis 172, and a 11.9 VID on the left eye. Just a reminder, it's important to put in an accurate date of birth here. One, it's a record that you could search by date of birth if you accidentally keyed in the wrong patient name or made a mistake in spelling the name. But it's really important for the MOONLENS because it's going to use the date of birth as a reference point to calculating the appropriate optic zone size. So date of birth is important in the software. Now, once we're done, we can click Save and move on to the next step. And that is to upload the topographies if we had a linked topographer. But if you do not have a linked topographer, you're simply going to click Start New Design. And that will take you to the data window. And this is where we're going to enter in all of that information that we collected from the topographer. But before we do that, I want to show you the RX the patient had. Is the software has taken the sphere and ignored the sill. So you're not calculating spherical equivalent. The idea is that we're shooting for the appropriate sphere across the horizontal meridian. The vertical meridian, the orthokeratology lens should be creating hydraulic force to move the steep axis and squeeze out much, if not all, of the astigmatism that's there. So you don't have to calculate a spherical equivalent. It's purely the sphere. You'll notice that the therapy target is a half diopter stronger. It's -4 rather than 350. The idea, of course, is that we want to take the patient to +50 in the AM after removal of the lens. So by the end of the day, they're no worse than plano. In my daughter's case, I get her to +50 in the AM after full effect, and it might be days before it wears off enough that she needs to put it back in. So by overshooting, it's helpful for both AM to PM regression to basically hold the stability of vision all day long, but also it's helpful for patients that might have the opportunity to go to a reduced wear schedule. Now, let's enter in the topography data, and you've got your flat RO, your steep RO, your flat E, your steep E. You're simply going to enter it in to these 4 boxes here, and that will allow the platform to determine the parameters of lens that you need. Along with a little more information, we're going to get to that. The optic zone is one of those things that you're able to customize in the MOONLENS. And this is not standard on all orthokeratology designs, but it is on the MOONLENS because we want to design different optics for your young patient versus your adult patient. So for young patients, we want smaller optic zones, smaller treatment zones. For adults, we want bigger optic zones and bigger resultant treatment zones so their aberrations are reduced. In kids, we want those aberrations to increase because that's part of the signal to slow down eye growth. So the way you choose optic zone is based on a chart like this, where the lower the RX, the bigger the optic zone might be. But you'll notice in children, the optic zone typically is smaller than it is in adults. And that the reason for that is, again, we're trying to affect the treatment zone size, trying to make it smaller in kids. But as the RX increases, you'll notice that the treatment zone size, or the optic zone, becomes smaller for both adults and kids. And the reason for that is, when you're dealing with higher RX changes, it's difficult to create that flattening that you need over a broad surface area. By reducing the optic zone size, you can create that big refractive change that you need over a smaller surface area, but still achieve target. So generally, you're going to use smaller optic zone in kids. Generally, you're going to use smaller optic zones in higher RXs. So we'll choose the appropriate optic zone size. Then finally, we're ready to calculate the lens. We'll just click Save and Continue. Now you'll notice with all of the data entered in to the parameter window, the software can then choose the appropriate MOONLENS parameters, which are given here: your base curve, your lens power, your diameter, your optic zone. But you'll also notice there's values for the steep meridian, as well as, there's values for the flat meridian as well as for the steep meridian. Therefore, this lens has been chosen as a toric. So the platform has determined, based on your entered data, whether this patient is best served with a symmetric landing or a toric landing. So lots of customization going on behind the scenes. You might also notice that the alignment zone angle for the flat meridian is different than the alignment zone angle for the steep meridian. With other designs, you might be using the same alignment zone shape for both the flat axis and the steep axis. And that's not necessarily what you want to do when you have two totally different depths, two totally different shapes between the flat and steep meridian. So again, another unique customization of the MOONLENS parameters. Now, the next step is to order your left lens, and you can just click add left lens here, and you go through the same process of entering in all that data. You can also enter in here lab instructions like rush for Tuesday delivery, or questions for the consultant. Can you check my calculations of the diameter, or whatever it might be? Down here, you have a discussion box which stays with this patient. So you can add comments with, which the consultants can respond to on that particular patient. So it's a helpful tool for all your patients that you might have some questions about, and you just want that backup from Bethany and the Art Optical consultants. Now, we've got our right eye parameters and our left eye parameters. We're ready to order the lens. Bethany, there's this request consultation box down here. Can you tell us what this is for and how it might be used by the consultants?
Yes, so with a new platform, whether you're new to OrthoK or whether you're new to MOONLENS, certainly everyone is new to this KATTCloud platform. So being able to have that option where you can click the box to request consultation, it just gives you kind of that reassurance that somebody's going to take a peek at the parameters that are entered, make sure that everything looks appropriate, that we haven't missed something. That might be, again, the example I talked about earlier, where maybe the E-value of the steep meridian looks a little questionable compared to the rest of the data that's provided. Then maybe that's something that we could take a look at and then discuss with the particular fitter, again, using that discussion area on that program. So it is kind of nice that we can communicate all within this platform. So we're not having to go to a separate email and communicate with each of the practitioners. We can just do it all in this one database.
Nice for the practitioners to be able to have the second set of eyes and have the expert eyes at Art Optical have a look at it. So that's one that you might use with some frequency as you get started. As Bethany said, nice to have that backup in the beginning. Once you click submit, that order is off to the Art Optical team. You're going to get a confirmation email, and that will give you the confidence to know that, hey, this thing has been sent to the art team. It's going to be processed. It was successfully done. Now, the next step is Art is going to receive that order, and they're going to process it at the lab and send it off to you. And you're going to have, therefore, a highly customized moon lens that is appropriate for base curve, for tear layer depth, the apical clearance, the optic zone size, lens diameter, the alignment zone shape, the alignment zone in both flat and steep meridian, the edge lift, and the toricity. So you're going to get a highly customized orthokeratology lens. It's a pretty awesome platform that way of building a modern next generation of ortho-K lens for your patients. Now the lens arrives and you do that dispensing visit and you get something that looks like this and you say, what the heck happened? I don't see that thin apical clearance or what appears to be touch surrounded by the reservoir. We have a lens that looks grossly too high in sagittal depth. This is a rather extreme example, but I want to encourage you to evaluate your fluorescein in a manner that is such you're not so worried about what you're seeing. And what I mean by that is just don't get stressed about the ortho-K fluorescein pattern. If we take this lens off the patient and we reapply, it looks like this. And this was just a big bubble under the lens. It wasn't applied with enough fluid or something goofy happened. And this is fluorescein analysis in orthokeratology lenses. It is horribly deceiving. For instance, are you looking at a lens that's touching the central cornea? An ortho-K lens should be 7 microns above the eye. It should not be bearing on the central epithelium. So if we are showing a pattern that looks like touch, is that inappropriate for the eye? What if the edge lift looks thinner in some areas, thicker in others? Is that a reason to discontinue this wear and contact the art team and redesign the lens? If the lens is tolerable, if the lens appears to be reasonably well centered, I wouldn't worry too much about the fluorescein pattern, because we're fitting them on patients that are brand new to rigid contact lenses. There's a lot of reflex tearing. There's a lot of lid interaction with the lenses. So we can get a very odd looking pattern. Bethany, can you give us some of your expertise on fluorescein analysis? When do you make a cutoff for, yeah, I think we want to choose not to dispensing this lens, or what are some of the signs that you would look for and say, yeah, I'm not too worried about this. I think we should dispense it. Share, please.
Yeah, so it's really uncommon for a lens, honestly, to not be dispensable. And if a lens truly is not dispensable, then we are looking at the data that was used to design the lens to make sure that there wasn't maybe a typo or something that's throwing it off, just because it is so uncommon that if we see a lens that's truly not dispensable, then something is amiss. Because in most cases, that first lens that you're going to receive is going to be dispensable. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to need to make changes. That doesn't mean it looks textbook. Honestly, most of the time, they don't look textbook. I mean, we always use these beautiful looking ortho-K patterns in fitting guides and in lectures and whatnot, but there's always going to be, like you said, maybe one side looks a little thinner than the other. Maybe it's shifted one way, it's sitting down a little bit. Those are not things that we get hung up on. If it has a general ortho-K pattern, the patient's relatively comfortable, you're going to send the patient home with the lens, because that follow-up topography, what we see, what's actually happening in the closed eye state overnight, that is certainly the key. And that's going to show us what we need to do. And that's not to say fluorescein pattern isn't usable. We do want them to, take a look at the fluorescein pattern, because it's nice to use for troubleshooting purposes, but we use it in conjunction with the topography outcome.
Yeah, such a good point, Bethany. I was thinking the same thing, that if the patient was really uncomfortable in the lenses, and as you know, that's not very common, but we saw a massively wide edge lift. That lens has a ski tip that's hanging way off the surface. As Bethany said, that'd be a good reason to modify the edge lift. If the patient's uncomfortable and we have an incredibly wide edge lift, those are some of the signs you're looking for that a lens needs to be altered. So yeah, the fluorescein pattern is important, but we're not, as Bethany said, we're not going to put 100% of our confidence in that pattern. As one of my mentors said, John Mountford, the guy who wrote the orthokeratology textbook, he said, fluorescein is there only to rule out extremely flat or steep or poorly designed lenses. Fluorescein is not sensitive enough, these are all direct quotes, not sensitive enough to fine tune the lenses. So don't get too hung up with the fluorescein. That's all Bethany and I wanted to share with you. If it looks like it could be dispensed, if it's even close, send it home, because these lenses are meant to work in the closed eye environment. They're not meant to be fit in the environment that we evaluate them behind the slit lamp. How we do want to assess them is mostly topographical, and the axial map tells us a couple things. We're going to use, the axial subtractive map, where we compare the baseline map that Bethany was talking about earlier to the post-wear topography. On the right is your subtraction. telling you what has changed between A versus B, what has changed between pre versus post. So where you see the blue, that's where you flatten the cornea out, you've reduced the myopic error. Then you can look at the centration of that blue treatment zone. You can also click your cursor in the center on the visual axis and determine the curvature change, which is therefore the RX change. In this case, we created a 2.67 diopter flattening between this visit and this visit right on the center of the topography. Therefore, we have a myopic reduction of 2.67. Another map that you're going to use is the tangential map. And in this one, you're ignoring what's in the center. That's what we do on the axial. We look at the center. In the tangential, you're looking at the red ring here. Where is it in relationship to the visual axis and the pupil? We're also looking at the blue ring. And this is where the lens lands down and creates a little bit of a compression spot on the epithelium. So in the center, you have your flattening. The red is where you have your reservoir of fluid pulling on the epithelium. The blue is where you have your alignment zone. So both the axial and the tangential map kind of give us a lot of the story in what's happened overnight. So rely on these topographies. You have to learn how to do a subtractive map. That's really key to your post-wear analysis. And then once you understand how to use the subtraction, you want to be able to analyze in axial and tangential. Sometimes axial is called sagittal, sometimes it's called power, sometimes tangential is called instantaneous or true curvature, but both are describing two different things. The axial map is power, the tangential map is shape. Now, once you have an outcome, a subtractive map, you can determine, did I get the ideal bullseye? Did I have a slightly tight-fitting lens, the frowny face? Did I have a slightly loose-fitting lens, the smiley face? Did I have a lens too far off the corneal apex, effectively steep? Or do we have a lens too tight in the alignment zone that creates a lateral displacement, or too small? So basically, you're using all of these post-wear topographies to help guide your next steps. But how do you resolve that the lens might be riding low or riding high or lateral or undercorrecting? Well, we're going to go back to the KATTCloud platform, and we're going to use it as a tool to help us design the appropriate parameters of lens. So in the cloud, you have all of these different topographical outcomes: central island, smiley face, frowny face, lateral displacement. And you can compare your outcome to the gallery or library of outcomes you see in the cloud software and figure out which one is most like my outcome. So that we're going to do here. I have my axial subtractive map, my tangential subtractive map. I'm looking at this in my topographer, and then I'm comparing that to the KATTCloud. And I've clicked on a bullseye. A bullseye is a perfectly centered blue treatment zone, a perfectly centered ortho-K outcome. This is not it. We have a low riding blue treatment zone, a low riding red ring. So we need to look through the gallery and find the topographical outcome that's most like this. So as we go through these tabs, central island, smiley face, frowny face, lateral displacement, which one looks most like this low centered blue treatment zone? There's also a button in the cloud that allows you to click and change to tangential, and then all of these library images change to tangential interpretation. So you can compare both the axial and the tangential as well. Now, what I think we're seeing is a blue treatment zone riding low that appears most like these images here, the frowny face outcome. So once we click on frowny face, we choose Is it a mild, a moderate, or severe change? You know that you had frowny face, that therefore the lens is too tight in the alignment zone. It wants to ride on the low side. So we're going to fix that. But by what degree or what severity do we fix it? Do we make a mild change, moderate change, or a severe change? When in doubt, always choose moderate. Bethany and the consultation team is going to tell you use moderate routinely. That's the one that's going to create a significant change in parameters. Where you might use mild is when you feel like the edge lift is just a hair too tight and you want to just loosen it up a little bit, or you just want the smallest change that may not alter the fit too much. When you'd use severe is when you have a high amount of discomfort and maybe slit lamp signs as well, in addition to our frowny face topography. I rarely use these extremes. For the most part, I'm using moderate as a change for most of the cases, and that's the right amount. So click moderate when in doubt. Then, if you also have an under or over correction or any other complications with the fit, then you can select any one of these boxes, such as an under correction of -75. I'm just going to enter that value and it's going to fix the parameters so that I have the appropriate outcome. So basically, we're going to use the software to do all of the calculations that we might normally have to do in practice, or that we'd rely on the art team to do in practice, but it's not necessary. The KATTCloud platform is going to do all of this work for you, making it incredibly efficient and easy as well as accurate. Now, the next step is to choose a period. And the reason for that is it's really helpful for both you and for the art team to know how long this lens was fit. As an example, if we only did a one-night effect and that didn't give the lens enough time to achieve its full treatment, the art team is going to say, well, looking at the outcomes, maybe we want to go a little bit longer in this current lens. Or if the lens is 6 months old and it's suddenly gone sideways, it was bullseye all the way along, and now it's turned into a smiley face, that could be a warped lens. That could be a problem with the lens itself. Not that we need brand new parameters. Patient may have been just flexing it too much in their fingers, dropped it too many times, and it just needs to be replaced. So recording the duration of time the lens is fit is helpful for you and the Art Optical team. Now, the final is to enter any additional requests that you have, and you can use that lab instructions box to do that. If you don't have any instructions, then just click Review Order, and that will take you to the final window, and you can submit your changes. So basically, what you and I have done by using our topographer's actual outcome compared to the gallery, we can manipulate the parameters. I mean, you might not know how much to change the alignment zone. You might not know how much to change the reverse curve depth when you have a problem. What about base curve when you under or over correction? How much should you change it? You don't need to know any of that stuff. The software is going to take care of that minutia of lens, ortho-K lens construction, and just finish it off for you. So a very helpful tool that way. So it's going to automate both your initial lens construction, but it's also going to help with fit optimization. And this is both these things are very powerful pieces of the whole system. It's not just a lens, but it's MOONLENS, but it's also MOONLENS with the KATTCloud platform that's designed to make your MOONLENS fitting as accurate, efficient, and successful as it possibly can. Now, as you can imagine, because so much of this is using software and not you sitting down in front of a slide ruler and calculating out each individual parameters, this is something your technician can do, and you don't have to be involved in the entire process. Of course, you as the optometrist are likely going to do all of the exam visits, the slit lamp, the VAs and such, but you probably won't do the topographies and both baseline and post-wear. You might analyze them, baseline and post-wear, but you're probably not capturing them. So your technician doing all of this capture can collect the information, enter it into the site. It's very easy to do once you know what to look for. Bethany, could I ask you a little bit about both the MOONLENS and the KATTCloud in general? I'm making claims that it makes practice efficient and easy. You've worked with many ortho-K lenses over your career. How does this KATTCloud fit into modern practice? Is this a tool that does in fact make practice efficient, accurate? I mean, could you give us some of your perspective from the consultant desk?
Yeah, so I love that everything is right together, that it's just all done on a single platform. It just streamlines the whole process. Like I said, with even communicating with the consultants or the lab and telling them different instructions that are required, you don't have to go to a separate email and generate that and send it off. It's just all together, and you can track your orders. So I love that process. And like you said, the technicians can do this portion of it as well. So I really think utilizing your staff to their full potential is really helpful and going to save practitioners time. So having it be very user friendly, very straightforward, you really can kind of get everybody involved at the office and maybe take some of that off of the practitioner. Like you said, they're still going to obviously need to be the one evaluating the outcome and looking at topographies, but being able to do those small details and processing the order and not have to do it themselves, I think that that's a great tool.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking, Bethany, that you're right. If you had the technician taking the topographies post-wear as an example, the doctor comes in and has a look and says, "Yep, smiley face." Just respond to the software smiley face. The technician can be doing that work guided by you as the practitioner. So you could be very involved, or in some practices the technician knows more about orthokeratology practice than the optometrist does, at least from the perspective of using the software platform. So kind of cool. So with this MOONLENS, you're able to get a lens that's highly customized. This is a next generation of ortho-K lens. It wasn't just designed to create ortho-K. It was designed to create different optics for the adults and for the kids. It was designed to create better outcomes for your astigmats. It was designed to create higher RX changes. So this lens has just been customized to the nth degree, and the software platform helps to do all that customization. So you don't have to be involved in calculating out base curve, reverse curve, alignment curve, edge lift, toricity, all these things, optic zone. The MOONLENS uses multiple optic zones, which we talked about earlier, and we talked about this in session 1 too. If you have the interest, and this is a really important piece of the MOONLENS, being able to manipulate how wide that reservoir, or where that reservoir is deepest, and also how wide the resultant treatment zone becomes. This is critical to creating the best possible myopia control, or for adults, the best possible quality of vision. So you're reducing aberrations. So this is one to learn a bit more about with the MOONLENS, and Bethany and the consultants can explain a little bit more about how important these zones are. And I can't underestimate, and I can't underemphasize how valuable the consultation team is. They are going to be your best friend in this treatment. You cannot do ortho-K without having an expert on your back, having a mentor to help you through this process. Topography might be new to you, and the art team understands virtually every topographer that's out there. They understand orthokeratology, and if that's new to you, they can help you with the procedures and practice that way. So they're an absolutely critical component to successful ortho-K, and I just can't understate how valuable Bethany and the art consultation team is to us in all of the designs we use, whether it's ortho-K or corneal GP or scleral or whatever it might be, custom soft.